The next thing you want to make sure that you embed in your experience-driven content is jurisdiction-specific information. So if you're just talking generally about what happens in the law and what happens in your practice area, those things can be very beneficial to the public because it gives nuance to why they would need a lawyer to know how to apply the name, rank, serial number rules that you can find on Google. But you probably want to go a little bit deeper into what's happening specific to the area that you're in and even within your state. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, where on today's episode, we are going to be talking about some of the recent Google updates that are going to have some pretty significant impacts on your search engine optimization and your website marketing overall. All right. So today, as we dive into today's topic, I want to make sure that we are setting the frame, right? We are in the month of August of 2025. So if you're checking us out at any time other than August of 2025, just a little heads up, this specific episode is about Google updates dealing with most recently June and July, and of course, what to do going forward, because the changes have already gone into effect, but they are already starting to have consequences for law firm owners. And I want to make sure that if you check us out, we are always getting new subscribers on YouTube. We are always getting new listeners to the podcast on Spotify, on Apple, on Google Podcasts. But it's really important that we know what time we're talking about so that you don't apply this information to a time period that is not applicable. But speaking of new subs on YouTube, I love that we are growing so rapidly on YouTube. And for those of you that are supporters of the podcast and have been referring your friends and fellow law firm owners, thank you very much for your support. And we ask that for those of you that are maybe just be finding us today, then you subscribe to the channel as we have updates coming out twice a week. And we want to continue to give you the news that you can use in the area of your law firm growth. So with that, let's dive into today's topic. So the thing that I want to tell you about right now is a Google update that has recently hit many law firms and hit many by surprise, right? So Google has a way of deciding what authority it is going to give and what recommendations it is going to give based on various different factors, right? And they're always looking at what is going to be of most value to those who are searching, right? So I want you to think about it. Google first is serving itself. Okay, so while it is the largest search engine, obviously it is a prolific player in the marketing space for law firms, it is really important to recognize that whenever it is evaluating whether or not you're going to be at the top of page 1 or at the bottom of page 3, it's doing so from the perspective of wanting to give the best recommendations to the public, so the public continues to come to Google for its search needs. Right? So that is its own priority. You may be positively or negatively affected. You are not the product, right? The public is the product for purposes of Google. Now, having said that, Google is going to be looking to make sure that as it is serving the public through recommendations, that those recommendations are serving the needs of the people, right? If I search for something and it doesn't get me what I want, I might say, maybe I need to search over here instead, right? So it is always optimizing. And most recently, the most recent update that has hit Google, or I should say that has hit law firms, has really changed the way that it is weighting different factors in the search world. So a couple of things, right? So the first thing is that law firms fit into a category that Google has identified as YMYL, and that is your money or your life, right? So if your service affects your money or your life, you're in a particular category, which means that something seriously bad could happen if we don't give you good recommendations. So Google is highly optimizing in the area that law firms fit in. And as a result, it is placing more weight on certain factors. So the first factor that has become more heavily weighted is what we refer to as EEAT, right? That is experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. In that category, Google is going to be looking for things on your website that will demonstrate that the public is going to get a high level of experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness from the content that is available on your site. So when Google scrubs your site, it is going to be looking for content that has been created by lawyers, that has a high degree of reliability. So once upon a time, we would say to you, there were keywords that you would embed on your site. But if you just have the keywords, the words that people are searching for, don't think that you're going to meet the EEAT standard. That standard now is much more expansive, and it is going to require more to be identified on your website than just the words that a person is searching for. The other key factor that is getting now more weight is the UX experience. That is the user experience, right? Google is favoring sites that are easy to use. And that means you have a great load time, right? You don't have a whole bunch of clunky, high volume data that is going to make it hard for someone to be able to consume the information on your website. And the information is helpful. It's laid out in a way that's easy to use, easy to find, and accessible to the public. Okay. So if your firm's content is thin, if you went to AI and asked a whole bunch of legal questions and just dumped it on your website so you could have stuff on your website, you are going to suffer the consequences of that. Okay. Now, on the flip side, if you have deep, well-written, lawyer-authored content, you are going to be getting a leg up here. Okay. So for those of you that are natural writers who have authored a lot of scholarly publications, maybe you've been in a lot of journals, things like that, that content being actually on your website and accessible on your website is going to say to Google that you meet the EEAT standard. So what do we do with this update, right? The weighting of Google's evaluation of your website in the area of EEAT and UX, right? What do we do with that? So there's 5 things that I want you to focus on relative to your website that you need to be doing right now in order to take advantage of this update. So the first thing is, I want you to understand why Google updates, right? Most law firms rely on Google, and the updates that Google has put in place, we've already talked about a little bit, right? We talked about the fact that Google's product, right? What Google is trying to get access to is the public. You are between Google and the public, right? So they don't want access to you. They know that you're going to come to them because you want access to the public. They also want access to the public, and they want to continue to serve the public. So when you think about it through that lens, you have to recognize that making you happy is ancillary to making the public happy. And more, as our world becomes more AI driven, the way that people are looking for content, a lot of people are now asking ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot, right? A lot of people are going to AI to find information, but search is still where it's at for the vast majority of the public. And so when you think about that, you have to remember that in order to get the public over to the platform, they have to be able to serve up to the public in ways that are most effective to the public, right? So to a certain degree, Google is competing with itself in the area of Copilot, or rather in the area of Gemini, but it is also competing with AI in general. So just keep that in mind when it comes to how we approach dealing with this most recent update. The second is that there has been a rise in user-driven and experience-driven content. Okay. So what do I mean by that? So Google is now favoring content that shows real legal experience. So once upon a time, we used to tell people, don't go out and spend a whole bunch of money on these fake awards, the awards, the top 40 under 40, right? I remember first time I got a top 40 under 40, I laughed like so hard because one, I was 41 years old. So quite a few years ago. But then on top of that, I also got the top 40 under 40 in criminal defense. And I have never practiced criminal defense in my life. In fact, the lawyer who is one of my biggest mentors and somebody that is very near and dear to my heart taught me how to try cases. Major criminal defense lawyer, former prosecutor, first assistant prosecutor in the county where I kind of grew up as a lawyer. when I sent that award to him, he was like, "Oh, great, you crossed over to the dark side." I was like, "Nope, never once." Never once. One time I went to court for a former partner of mine and got an adjournment in a criminal case, but that's it. But anyway, point being, once upon a time, stacking those awards was a way to go. A lot of people would buy those awards, and they are still authoritative. We do tell people that, the public does not know the difference between Supreme Court certified as XYZ and, National Organization of Bestest Lawyers in the World certifies you as top 40 under 40 or whatever the category is. Oftentimes the public is not aware of that, at least not yet. I do think that is going to change, and probably in a relatively short period of time. But at least for now, that is still a value. But stacking in that area is far less effective now for purposes of Google. So just having awards and having awards as taking up space on your website is not going to get you the same bang for your buck as having real legal expertise and experience demonstrated on your website. So that means things that you have control over directly, your blog posts, right? Your articles. When you start outsourcing those to content mills, and a lot of lawyers do, because there's only so many hours in a day, you have to be aware that if a lawyer is not drafting it, and a lawyer who practices in the area and it does not read as legalese to a certain degree, Google is going to pick up on that. Now, you might be saying, well, where's the balance? Because, on the one hand, we do have that rating. We don't want to get too high up the plane. We don't want, you shouldn't have to be a Mensa candidate who graduated from Harvard to be able to read and understand what is on the website. Still true. You also don't want to have a third grade education level content on your website. It needs to be something that a lawyer, even if you're explaining it in layman's terms, has written, has authored, and has talked about the nuances and complexities of the law, right? Because again, you're aiming for authority, you're aiming for trustworthy, and you're aiming for experience and expertise. All right. The next thing you want to make sure that you embed in your experience-driven content is jurisdiction-specific information, right? So if you're just talking generally about what happens in the law and what happens in your practice area, those things can be very beneficial to the public because it gives nuance to why they would need a lawyer to kind of know how to apply the name, rank, serial number rules that you can find on Google. But you probably want to go a little bit deeper into what's happening specific to the area that you're in. And even within your state, you might even want to get more granular into the county, into the specific types of courts that you're in, because that information is going to show to Google, as well as to the public, but really show to Google that you are not just somebody who downloaded information, learned information out of a textbook, but you're somebody who is a player in the field where you are practicing. And the more of that type of content you have on the website, the higher you will rank for purposes of Google. All right. Now let's talk about EEAT in action. Okay. Firms should highlight the credentials of the attorneys who are offering content on their website. Now, once upon a time, like we've always said, you need to have some basic understanding of who the person is that is going to be working with a member of your prospective client, right? So the lawyer, you've always had their credentials there, but now that expertise is really going to be shown when you start talking about the number of years that a person has been practicing, the representative cases, right? And by the way, representative cases don't just have to be published cases. You can even have unpublished cases that someone has worked on that can show that they are, again, well rehearsed in the practice area, that they have expertise in the area, that they're known in the area. Okay. So you want to have things like their bar number and their bar admissions, their years of experience available on the website. Now, again, the goal here is experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. So the more information that you put out about the individuals that can be verified through normative search, right? Verifying things like bar numbers, verifying things like years of experience. You put your college and your graduate school and your law school and the dates of graduation. The more you put out there showing that the person is experienced in an area, the more it is going to help you. Now, don't say I have a second year associate. If I put that they graduated 2 years ago, am I going to get dinged by Google? Because you're not, right? It's not going to show that that person has low experience, but this is a battle cry for you to get experience for your lower years of practice professionals, right? So if you have an attorney that is 2 years out, they are less authoritative in presumption than somebody who is 10 years out. But the more you stack in their deck, right? Their ballywick might not be in the area of experience. You might have to show their experience through other things. Like you might have to show that they are volunteering for settlement panels or that they have been chosen for leadership, right? You need to build up the people who are on your team. And once upon a time, the thought process was, when you become a partner, we'll be concerned about that. Until you get there, right? Until you have, through working with clients, generated enough of a book, you're an associate. And as an associate, our concern is that you're available to do the work that a partner generates. That model is dying out now because you don't have, unless you are in a very large firm where most of the work is being fed internally, right? 100 lawyers, everybody probably has 1 or 2 people that they could generate some area of casework and pass it around the firm. So you have enough people feeding other people. But generally speaking, in smaller law firms, there's less of that. So however you are getting work to your lower generating clients or lower generating attorneys, those attorneys are going to need to have some cachet on your website. And don't think that if you build someone up, they're going to leave, because the reality is lawyers move around. They move around whether you build them up or you leave them flat, right? And the more you build them up, the more you are not just improving our profession, not just doing a great service to an individual, but you're also benefiting your own law firm, because clients will be more happy to work with somebody who appears to be authoritative and trustworthiness, right? So this doesn't just help you in your marketing. This helps you in your business building. All right. Strategy number 4, when we're talking about this most recent Google update, is that you want to think about the user experience relative to your intake flow. So what do we mean by that? We mean that Google tracks how visitors interact with your site. So if you have a whole lot of folks that click on your homepage and click off, right? If you have a very high bounce rate, you're going to be weighted differently than someone who clicks, stays on for a longer period of time, clicks around the site, right? If you've got calls to action where people immediately take action, if you have information that is cross-linked on your site. So if somebody is looking to read articles about mediation and you are a firm that has that as a service and it pops up on the homepage and then you click and it goes over to a blog post and then that blog post references within the site the credentials of the lawyer who handles mediation for your firm, you're going to be granted more credit by Google, because Google is going to say this is a site that is valuable to the user. The user is getting something out of this because the user is staying on the site longer and is clicking around the site, right? As opposed to going to the homepage saying, nope, not for me, or interesting, I'll come back to it, and they keep searching. The other thing is that you want to think about your load time relative to your user experience. And this is going to be taking up more and more of the weight for purposes of the user experience portion that Google is really giving a lot of credit to right now. So your load time obviously can be adversely affected by putting content on your website that is hard for a search engine to scroll. So compressing external files, like if you put an article on, your article can be in the form of a Word document that has a lot of pages and thus is harder and takes longer to read than in the form of a compressed PDF, right? So when you think about how content is delivered to the public, it doesn't just need to be easily accessible. It needs to be easily accessible and read quickly for purposes of your digital file. So the more you put on your website, the more strategic you have to be in terms of how long it takes for that information to be read by a search engine. You also want to think about your CTAs, right? Your call to action. Where are they? Is it hard to find the call us button, right? I think most of us, we've had many episodes about websites. We've talked about having your CTA in the top right-hand corner, right? That big call us now or connect now or whatever you say, right? That's kind of industry standard. But do you have a CTA that maybe scrolls down the screen? As I'm scrolling down the homepage, is the CTA following me? Does the CTA pop up on the screen when I am on different pages, right? After some period of time searching, am I getting a reminder, call us now? Am I able to see it easily? Am I able to access it easily? Is there a contact form that I can link, that I can access to on every page, right? The more that you are making it easy for people to not only consume content, but get a hold of you, that is also going to enhance the user experience. That's what people are looking for. And that is what Google will give you credit for. All right. Fifth and final strategy, what lawyers should do right now. If you do nothing else, okay, you need to audit your website. Audit your website for the user experience and also for the EEAT, right? The experience, the expertise, the authority, and the trustworthiness. And you can build that in so many different areas, right? Now, we've talked about internal links, linking around the site, but sometimes external links also give validation, right? You don't want to send people off your site. So you don't want to have too many external links, but sometimes referring to things that you are participating in, like if you're a litigator and your judiciary has panels or clubs or organizations or service that you can participate in, whether it's by volunteerism or by organization, by your bar association, those things, again, build you up as somebody who is a professional and somebody who is a player, if you will, in your space. The more you put of that type of information, the more you increase that authority and trustworthiness. And the things that you can do that can deliver value right now are really easy, like FAQs, right? People talk about video as kind of the next wave, right? And many of us have been talking about video as the next wave for the past decade, right? Video is definitely a high authority way of educating and engaging with your public. But even if you are not doing video, FAQs can be in written form, right? Simple, easy to access information. You're giving out help to the public, right? And the idea is that there is a difference between a law firm website that is all about, here's how great we are, contact us now, right? You might think that that's increasing your EEAT, but that clearly is about sales. But when you pair it with, here's how you should be informed as a member of the public. Here's how you should be working with a lawyer who does X, which is what we do. Here's how you should be protecting your rights, should be advocating your interests, etc. You are of service. And the more of service you are to the public, the better the user experience, because they're getting something out of engaging with you, whether they hire you or not. And the more you're going to increase that EEAT. And the thing that I really want to tail out with today is just to remind you that for a lot of us, we are already doing these things, right? So this is a great part. This is one of the few times that I actually get to record a podcast episode that is all about being a professional on steroids. Right? So many times I come here and I'm talking about business and I'm talking about the business of law, and people are excited to learn about that, but they're like, oh, as a professional, I really want to do this, right? My perfect example, I have one client here at Law Firm Mentor, and I won't say the person's name, but if this person listens to the podcast, which I know she does, she might know who she is, right? We have been talking for years about her love of teaching CLE. She has been a practicing attorney for more than 2.5 decades now, and very much loves speaking publicly and loves teaching CLE. And I always ask, what does that do for you now? Right? Not just how does that stroke your ego? How does that make you feel good? How does that, increase the respect that other people have for you in your profession? But how does that help you now in business? We helped her build out a whole funnel for how she can take her CLEs and ultimately reduce it to something that is a usable, marketable product, right? Both in the area of video as well as in written form and even in audio form. But all of that to say, when we talk about teaching CLE is areas where you are increasing your authority, right? You're showing up as somebody who is a respected voice in the space. It also increases your trust, right? Obviously, if judges are being taught by you, judges must trust you, right? But it's also showing your experience and your expertise. So you get the EEAT. But the great thing is that the user experience, when you share that content with them, you are giving them direct access to kind of behind the curtain of what you share with lawyers and judges. So even though a lawyer might view that content very differently and might be able to use it more directly than a client, because a client doesn't have all the nuances and all of that, you can pair those two together. You can say, here's what I taught at a local CLE about X, Y, and Z. And there's some specific nuances that I have for my clients that I can share with you when you book a call, right? So you're giving a great user experience because you're sharing information. You are increasing your EEAT in the eyes of Google, both of which are going to grant you some higher authority and get you ranked higher on the search engine. But then also it's helping you to convert people because they're going to see the great information. If something I'm missing, I need to be able to engage with a lawyer to find out more. All right, everybody. We have been talking today about the most recent Google update. I hope that you have gained some great value out of today's episode. I am Allison Williams, your host of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, and I will see you on our next episode.